May I request the speakers of the first session, the author of novel Open City, Teju from US, and the journalist, writer Jai Arjun Singh from India.
As a reviewer, I struggled with the book at first because it's so rich, both in terms of the actual writing style, the prose, and in terms of the themes and the ideas it contains, that one reading just didn't seem enough. And to do a review in limited review space on a short deadline just felt like a travesty. I've gone back and read it a second time and seen things in it that I didn't see the first time. I highly recommend it to all of you, and we'll talk about the book in a bit. But just by way of introduction, perhaps we can have a little bit about Teju himself. Teju, you're here with us as a writer, of course, but you worked as a professional art historian. You specialized in Dutch art. You're a very keen and a very good photographer as well. And reading about you online, I discovered that at various points in your life you have been a dishwasher, a hematology researcher, a cartoonist, a gardener. You're only 36 years old. How did you manage to pack all this in? And more to the point, when did the writing life really take hold of you?
When I first started at university in the States, I was very poor. I didn't have any money, and the only job I could find in order to sustain myself was as a dishwasher in the cafeteria. So that was my job. But with time, better things opened themselves up. You know who else was a very famous dishwasher at the beginning of his career? Is Bruce Lee. So I wear it as a mark of pride. I still do dishwashing these days, but only domestically in my own house. The writing began much later, in my mid-20s. And I think what happened with that was that when I was in school, I was always very good with English literature. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I was there until I was 17 years old, before going to the States. I feel I had a natural talent for the language, but not until I was in my mid-20s did I discover what was going to be my own mode, my own approach to writing. And my approach, which I discovered and which I have stayed with, was that I want to evoke complicated emotions, complicated states of mind in all their intricacy and subtlety with the simplest language possible. In fact, I was born in the US, but I went to Nigeria as an infant, grew up there. So when I returned to the US, I was returning as a US citizen to a country I didn't know at all. What really happened was when I started university, I discovered the university library. And Mark Twain has a marvelous phrase where he says, you should not let school get in the way of your education. And I think what he means by that is this idea that the environment of a school or a university provides you lots of opportunities that have nothing to do with what's happening in the classroom. So I was a fairly mediocre student, but I spent a lot of time in the library pursuing just the things that interested me, but not just reading. I spent a great deal of time in the basement of the library, in the audio-visual room, watching films. That was a very important part of my education.
This is your first novel.
Yeah.
You've written a book before this, a very slim book that doesn't seem to be widely available. Every Day is for the Thief. Since you've been working as an art historian, that presumably involves a very different writing discipline from what you've been doing as a novelist and for
That's
Open
right.
City. Is that something that you ever struggled with, or did you successfully put them in completely separate boxes and work on those two things on separate time?
What happened to me about 2 years ago was I was in a situation where I had made I'm studying at Columbia University in New York, and I'm studying Renaissance art. And I had made quite a lot of progress with the dissertation, but I was put in a situation where I had also written just about 60 pages of this novel, Open City, and a publisher had bought it. And so the situation I was confronted with was that in the next 1 year, I had to finish either my PhD or I had to finish my novel. ideally both, but the one risk I could not take was to have the year pass and I've not finished either. So I gave up the struggle of trying to do both at the same time, and I faced the novel 100%. And so to a certain extent, it's a struggle to not have finished the PhD, but I'm very, very delighted that I was able to finish the novel, because they are very different kinds of thinking. I much prefer the kind of writing I do creatively to the academic writing, even though a lot of my sustenance as a thinker and as a writer comes from things that have been written by academics, and I think that's probably true of many writers in the audience.
This is a book that, like I mentioned earlier, has so many, it covers some of the really big themes of good literary fiction, contemporary literary fiction. It's about immigrations and the history of human movements and the effect that they've had on the psyches of people, even several generations down. It's about the history of communities, of cities, discrimination, isolationism, and many other things. But what's really interesting is that all this is filtered through the consciousness of this one very compelling character, the narrator, protagonist. He's a man named Julius. He's half Nigerian, half German, and he lives in New York where he's doing a psychiatry fellowship.